Open the cabinet under your kitchen sink. Go on, I'll wait. Count the bottles. A blue one for glass. A yellow one for the counters. A pink one for the bathroom. Something in a can for the stove. A wipe for the wood furniture. Maybe a powder for the tub, too, sitting behind all the rest, half used. 7 bottles, 8 bottles, every one of them doing the same basic job in different colored plastic, and every one of them costing you money again the moment it runs dry. I am going to show you something that replaces every single one of those bottles with one jar. It cleans my kitchen, my bathroom, my windows, my floors, and the door handles in between. One jar, and it has been sitting on a shelf in my family since 1947. My name is Anna Beiler. I am Amish. I keep house on our farm here in Holmes County, Ohio, the same way my mother kept hers, and her mother kept hers before that. We do not own a cabinet full of bottles in this house. We own one jar, and it has never once let us down. If this is the kind of thing you came looking for, go on and subscribe now, and tell me down below which state you're watching from. I do like knowing where all of you are. Now let me tell you what's in that jar, and why it does the work of 7 different bottles instead of just one. I'll tell you the truth about how I came to trust it fully, because it wasn't from any book. It was from watching my own daughter, Mary, clean her first kitchen after she married last spring. She moved into a little rented place 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, an old farmhouse kitchen with a stove that had seen 40 years of suppers cooked on it. She had exactly 1 jar of the mix, and nothing else under her sink, because that's all I ever gave her. Within a week, she had that whole kitchen shining, counters, stove, the window over her sink, and she never once reached for a second bottle because there wasn't a second bottle to reach for. That's when I knew for certain this recipe still held up as well today as it did the year it was first mixed. Here is the first thing to understand, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every mess in your house, whether it's on your counter, your window, your stove, or your bathroom tile, comes down to one of 3 things: grease, mineral, or plain dust and film. That's the whole list. Not 4 things, not 10. 3. A window cleaner is built to cut oily film and leave no streak behind. A bathroom spray is built to break down mineral, the same hard water buildup that leaves a ring in your toilet or a haze on your shower glass. A degreaser is built to cut fat. Plain and simple, the kind that clings to your stovetop after supper. 3 different jobs, 3 different bottles, and each one is only good at its own single task. That is not by accident. That is by design. My husband's grandmother did not need 7 bottles because she understood something the stores would rather you never think about too hard. If you build one mix that goes after grease, mineral, and film all at the same time, you no longer need 7 different products. You need one. And that one mix has existed this whole time. It just never got a shelf of its own at the store because there was no money in selling you one jar that never ran out. Her mix was simple. Plain white vinegar to cut grease and dissolve mineral, both, since vinegar is mildly acidic and mineral buildup gives way to acid, the same way a rusty hinge gives way to a little oil. A spoonful of baking soda for gentle grit, enough to lift dried food or soap film without scratching a single surface it touches. And a few drops of real liquid soap, the plain kind, to break the surface tension of the water so it spreads thin and even across whatever you're cleaning instead of beating up and running off. 3 ordinary things, already sitting in most kitchens, mixed the right way in the right order. That's the entire secret my husband's grandmother carried to her grave, and the one her daughter carried after her, and the one that sits on my own shelf today. It works because those 3 ingredients aren't fighting each other, the way some folks assume a homemade mix might. The vinegar handles the mineral and most of the grease. The soap picks up whatever fat the vinegar can't fully break down on its own, since fat clings to fat, and soap is built to pull grease away from a surface and hold it suspended in water until you wipe it off. The baking soda gives just enough gentle scrubbing power for anything dried on without ever scratching glass or a painted surface the way a harsher powder would. Each one is doing a slightly different piece of the same job, and together they cover more ground than any single bottle from the store ever could on its own. Let me tell you about 1947, because the year matters more than you'd think at first hearing. Before that year, most households in this country cleaned with plain mixes, not too different from mine. Vinegar, soap, a little soda, sometimes lemon in the summer when it was cheap at the market. Nothing bought special. Nothing shipped in from a factory. Right after the war ended, a great many chemical companies that had spent years making things for soldiers came home looking for something new to sell to ordinary folks, and they found their answer sitting right there in the American kitchen sink. They began selling single-purpose sprays, one bottle at a time, each one promising to do its narrow job better than any plain mix ever could. A window spray that left no streak, a tile cleaner that fought soap scum, a furniture polish that made wood shine like new. Each bottle good at exactly one thing, and only one thing, because a bottle that did everything would only ever need to be bought once, and there is no fortune sitting in a bottle a family buys a single time and keeps for years. My husband's grandmother watched this happen from her own farmhouse kitchen. She watched neighbor after neighbor start filling their cabinets. One bottle for the kitchen, one for the bath, one for the good furniture in the front room, back when the very same jar on her own shelf did the work of all of them combined. She never once wrote her recipe down in any book. She stood her daughter beside her at this same counter and showed her with her own two hands, and that daughter showed my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law pressed the recipe into my hands the week I was married, the same as her mother had done for her. That's the whole distance from 1947 to right now, sitting in your kitchen listening to me. One recipe, 4 generations, never once replaced by something newer. Because nothing newer ever actually did the job better. It only did the job narrower, in a prettier bottle, with a better story told about it on television. Think about what happened to the pantry shelf over those same years. Because it didn't stop with cleaning sprays. A single bar of soap once washed your hands, your dishes, and your laundry alike. Now there's a bottle for each of those too, and a different one again for your face, and another still for your hair, every one of them promising something the last one supposedly couldn't do. None of that happened because the old ways stopped working. It happened because a shelf full of narrow products sells better, year after year, than one plain thing that lasts. My husband's grandmother watched the very same pattern take hold in her own lifetime, bottle by bottle, and she simply never let it take hold in her own kitchen. If you've stayed with me this far, you may as well hit subscribe now, so the next one finds you without you having to go looking for it. I want to be plain and honest with you here, because my mother did not raise me to oversell a simple thing. This mix will not do absolutely everything under your roof. It will not lift burnt sugar scorched onto the bottom of a pan, not without some soaking first. It will not disinfect the way bleach does, and if there's been raw meat on that counter or sickness in the house, you reach for bleach, plain and simple, and you never, ever mix the two together in the same breath. But for the everyday work of a house, the counters, the glass, the stovetop, the sink, the floors, the bathroom tile, the door handles everyone touches a dozen times a day, this one jar handles every bit of it, and if you're honest with yourself, that covers most of what those 7 bottles under your sink were ever doing in the first place. Let me tell you about my neighbor, an English woman named Carol, who bought the old Hostetler place down the road from us about 2 years back. Carol came by one afternoon complaining about her grocery bill, and not the food part of it either, the cleaning part. She told me she was spending near $40 some months on sprays and wipes and pods for her dishwasher and tablets that dropped into her toilet tank, and none of it seemed to leave her house smelling any cleaner than before, just different, and different in a way that gave her a headache by evening. I mixed her a jar right there at her own kitchen counter that same afternoon. Vinegar, baking soda, a little dish soap, water to fill the rest. Cost her under $2, and most of what went into it she already owned. She used it that week on her counters, her stovetop, her bathroom, her windows. She called me that Sunday evening and told me she had thrown out 6 half-empty bottles that very morning, standing in her own kitchen, because she'd lined them all up on the counter and realized she hadn't touched most of them in over a month. She has not bought a single spray bottle since, and that was 2 years ago this coming fall. She still keeps a jar of the mix on her counter, same as I keep mine. There was another family, too, closer to town, an older couple named the Hendersons, who'd lived in their house near 30 years. Mr. Henderson had a workshop off the garage where he did small engine repairs for neighbors, and his hands stayed greasy most days of the week. His wife had given up trying to keep the utility sink clean, said it looked stained no matter what she scrubbed at it with. 1 jar of the mix, left to sit on the grease for a full 10 minutes before wiping, and that sink came back to white. She told me afterwards she'd spent more on specialty degreasers over the years than she cared to add up out loud. Here's something else worth saying plainly, and I say it not to frighten anyone, only because it's true and it matters. Every one of those 7 bottles under your sink is its own separate mix of chemicals, most of them harmless enough on their own, but you would be surprised how many folks accidentally mix 2 of them together while scrubbing a bathroom, a tile cleaner, and a mold spray, say, and end up coughing their way out of the room before they even know what happened. 1 jar means one thing to keep track of, one thing to store safely, one thing to keep up out of reach of the little ones running through the house. That alone is worth something, even before you count the money saved. There's a cost to your health in all that variety, too, one that doesn't show up on the receipt. A house with 7 different sprays going through the air week after week is a house with 7 different sets of fumes settling into the carpet, the curtains, the corners of every room. My own mother used to say, a house should smell like the vinegar and the sunshine that cleaned it, not like a hardware store. I've kept to that in my own home, and I notice it most whenever I visit an English friend's place, freshly cleaned with the store bottles. The smell sits heavy in a way plain vinegar never does, and it lingers long after the cleaning's done. Now let me tell you exactly how to mix it, plain and in order, the same way it was shown to me, so you can go and do this yet this afternoon. Take an empty spray bottle, one you already have lying around, washed out well with warm water first. Pour in 1 cup of plain white vinegar. Add 2 level tablespoons of baking soda slowly, a little at a time, because it will fizz up at you right away, and that's exactly what it's meant to do. Let it settle a minute once the fizzing stops. Add a few drops, no more than a teaspoon in all, of plain liquid dish soap, the ordinary kind, not the thick foaming kind from a pump. Fill the rest of the bottle with warm water, then give it a gentle shake, not a hard one, or you'll have suds climbing straight out the top and onto your counter. That's the whole of it. About $1 in ingredients, most of which are sitting in your kitchen cabinet at this very moment. For counters and stovetops, spray it on, let it sit half a minute, then wipe clean with a cloth. For glass and mirrors, spray thin and wipe with a dry cloth or even a sheet of old newspaper, and it comes away without one single streak left behind. For bathroom tile and sinks, spray it on and give it a few minutes this time before wiping, since mineral takes a bit longer to loosen its grip than plain grease does. For a soap scum ring built up in the tub, spray heavier still and let it sit a full 10 minutes, and you will feel the difference under your cloth the moment you start wiping. For floors, add half a cup of the mix into a bucket of warm water and mop the same as you always have. Give the bottle a little shake before each use, since the baking soda tends to settle down at the bottom over time. Mixed with water this way, it keeps a good 2 weeks before it starts to lose its strength, so I make up a fresh bottle every other Monday, same as my mother always did before me. A few small notes worth remembering as you go. If you're after a mix built just for glass, leave the baking soda out entirely and use only vinegar, water, and 1 drop of soap. since baking soda can leave a faint film on glass if you use too heavy a hand with it. If your kitchen has a strong vinegar smell that bothers you, a few drops of lemon juice added at the end cuts the sharpness without changing how well it cleans. And if you're scrubbing something truly stubborn, a burnt pan or a long-neglected oven rack, let the mix sit a full hour, even overnight, before you wipe. Patience does more of the work than elbow grease ever will. I expect some of you are already turning questions over in your mind, so let me answer the three I hear the most. Is it safe to use around food? It is. Vinegar, baking soda, and plain dish soap are things you already keep near your food every single day of the week. Rinse a cutting board after if it eases your mind, same as you would with most anything else. Will the vinegar hurt my counters? On natural stone, granite, or marble especially, I'd steer clear, since the acid can dull the shine of stone over a long stretch of time. On tile, laminate, glass, and sealed wood, it's perfectly fine, and has been used on surfaces just like those for a great deal longer than any of us have been alive. If you're ever unsure about a stone counter, test a small hidden spot first and let your own eyes tell you. Is it safe with children and animals in the house? Far safer than most everything currently sitting under your sink, truth be told. Even so, label your bottle plainly and keep it up out of easy reach. The same simple courtesy you'd give any bottle in a spray container, mine included. One more question I get often enough that it's worth answering here. Does it work in a house with well water instead of city water? It does. And in truth, it often works even better, since well water tends to carry more mineral, and mineral is exactly what the vinegar in this mix goes after hardest. If your water runs especially hard, you may find you need to let the mix sit a touch longer on tile and glass, but the result at the end is the very same. I want to close with the same thought I always come back to, because I believe it clear through. This mix was never a secret kept from anyone. No one man in any back room ever decided to bury it. It simply stopped getting passed down, the way a great many good and useful things stop getting passed along, one generation at a time, quiet as anything, until one day, nobody left in the house remembers it was ever there to begin with. So here is what I'll ask of you, plain and simple. Mix the jar this week. Try it on your counters, your bathroom, your windows, your floors. Then come back and tell me down in the comments how it did for you. And tell me true, even if it let you down somewhere along the way, because I would always rather hear the honest truth than a kind lie meant to spare my feelings. And if it worked for you, the way it has worked in this house since 1947, teach it to somebody. A daughter, a neighbor, a son just setting up his first place, with a cabinet already filling up with bottles he'll likely never need. That's the only way a thing like this has ever managed to survive. Not tucked away in a book somewhere. Passed from one pair of hands into another, the way it was passed into mine. I think about that often when I'm standing at this counter, mixing a fresh bottle on a Monday morning. Somewhere back in 1947, a young wife stood in this same kitchen, maybe worried about money the way most young wives are, and found a way to keep her whole house clean without spending a dime she didn't have to. She had no way of knowing her recipe would still be mixed in this same kitchen more than 70 years later, or that a stranger clear across the country might hear about it and try it in their own home this very week. That's the quiet thing about a good recipe. It outlives the person who first thought of it, so long as somebody keeps passing it along. Subscribe so the next one finds you too, and there should be another one of mine waiting on your screen right now, if you'd like to keep me company a while longer. Mind the little ones. Keep your bottle labeled plain, and God keep you well.